We now come to other subordinate clauses in which the words do have their customary reference without, however, a thought occurring as sense and a truth value as referent. How this is possible is best made clear by examples. What he who discovered the elliptic form of the planetary orbits died in misery. If the sense of the subordinate clause were thought here, it would have to be possible to express it also in a separate sentence. But this does not work because the grammatical object, he, has no independent sense and only mediates the relations with the consequent clause, died in misery. For this reason, the sense of a subordinate clause is not a complete thought, and its referent is Kepler, not a truth value. One might object that the sense of the whole does constrain a thought as part, namely, that there was somebody who first discovered the elliptic form of the planetary orbits, who, however, takes the whole to be true, cannot deny this part. This is undoubtedly so, but only because otherwise the subordinate clause, he who discovered the elliptic form of the planetary orbits, would have no referent. If anything is asserted, there is always an obvious presupposition that the simple compound proper names used have reference. If one therefore asserts, quote, Kepler died in misery, there is a presupposition that the name Kepler designates something, but it does not follow that the sense of the sentence Kepler died in misery contains the thought that the name Kepler designates. The negation would have to run not Kepler did not die in misery, but Kepler did not die in misery, or the name Kepler has no referent. That the name Kepler designates something is just as much a presupposition as the assertion Kepler died in misery. As for the contrary assertion, now languages have the fault of containing expressions which fail to designate an object, though their grammatical form seems to qualify them for that purpose, because the truth of some sentences is a prerequisite. Thus, it depends on the truth of the sentence. There was someone who discovered the elliptic form of planetary orbits, whether the subordinate clause, he who discovered the elliptic form of the planetary orbits, really designates an object, or only seems to do so while having in fact no referent. And thus, it may appear as if our subordinate clause contains as a part of its sense the thought that there was somebody who discovered the elliptic form of the planetary orbits. If this were right, the negation would run, either he who discovered the elliptic form of the planetary orbits did not die in misery, or there was nobody who discovered the elliptic form of the planetary orbits. This arises from an incompleteness of language, from which even the symbolic language of mathematical analysis is not altogether free. Even their combinations of symbols can occur which appear to refer to something having, at any rate so far, no referent, for instance, divergent infinite series. This can be avoided, for example, by means of the super stipulation, and divergent infinite series shall refer to the number 0. A logically complete sentence should satisfy the conditions that every expression grammatically well constructed as a proper name out of signs already introduced shall in fact designate an object, and that no new sign shall be introduced as a proper name without having a referent assured. The logic books contain warnings against logical mistakes arising from the ambiguity of expressions. I regard as no less pertinent a warning against aberrant proper names having no reference. The history of mathematics supplies errors which have arisen in this way. This lends itself to demagogic abuse as easily as ambiguity, perhaps more easily. The will of the people can serve as an example, for it is easy to establish that there is, at any rate, no generally accepted referent for this expression. It is therefore by no means unimportant to eliminate the source of these mistakes, at least in science, once and for all. Then such objections as the one discussed above would become impossible because it could never depend upon the truth of a thought whether a proper name had a referent. With the consideration of these noun clauses may be coupled that of types of adjective and verbal clauses which are logically closely related to them. Adjective clauses also serve to construct compound proper names, even like, unlike noun clauses, they are not sufficient by themselves for this purpose. These adjective clauses are to be regarded as equivalent to adjectives. Instead of the square root of 4, which is smaller than 0, one can also say the negative square root of 4. We have here the case of a compound proper name constructed from the predicate expression with the help of the singular definite article. This is at any rate permissible if the predicate applies to one and only one single object. Expressions can be constructed that predicate expressions can be so constructed that characteristics are given by adjective clauses, as in our example, by the clause which is smaller than 0. It is evident that such an adjective clause, cannot be thought as sense or a truth value as referent any more than the noun clause should. Its sense, which can also be expressed in many cases by a singular adjective, is only a part of a thought. Here, as in the case of the noun clause, there is no independent subject, therefore no possibility of reproducing the sense of the subordinate clause in an independent sentence. Places, instants, stretches of time are logically considered. Objects, hence the linguistic designation of a definite place, definite instant, or a stretch of time, is regarded as a proper noun. Now, adverbial clauses of place and time can be used for the construction of such a proper name in a manner similar to that which we have seen in the case of noun and adjective clauses. In the same way, predicate expressions containing reference to places, etc., can be constructed. It is to be noted here also that the sense of these clauses, of these subordinate clauses, cannot be reproduced in an independent sentence, since an essential component, namely the determination of place or time, is missing and is only indicated by a relative pronoun or a conjunction. In conditional clauses, also, there may usually be recognized to occur an indefinite indicator having a similar correlate in the dependent clause. We have already seen this occur in noun, adjective, and adverbial clauses. As far as each indicator refers to the other, both clauses together form a connected whole, which as a rule expresses only a single thought in the sentence. If a number is less than 1 and greater than 0, its square is less than 1 and greater than 0. The component in question is a number in the conditional clause and it's in the dependent clause. Hmm. It is by means of this very indefiniteness that the sense acquires the generality expected of a law. Oh. It is this which is responsible for the fact that the antecedent clause alone has no complete thought as its sentence, in combination with the consequent clause expresses one and only one thought, whose parts are no longer thoughts. It is in general incorrect to say that the hypothetical judgment in the hypothetical judgment, two judgments are put in reciprocal relationship. If this or something similar is said, the word judgment is used in the same sense as I have connected with the word thought, so that I would use this formulation. The formulation: a hypothetical thought establishes a reciprocal relationship between two thoughts. This could be true only if an indefinite indicator is absent, but in such a case, there would also be no generality. If an instant of time is to be indefinitely indicated in both conditional and dependent clauses, it is often achieved merely by using the present tense of the verb, which in such a case, however, does not which in such a case, however, does not indicate the temporal present. Its grammatical form is then the indefinite indicator in the main and subordinate clauses. An example of this is when the sun is in the Tropic of Cancer, the longest day in the northern hemisphere occurs. Here also, it is impossible to express the sense of the subordinate clause in a full sentence because this sense is not a complete thought. If we say, the sun is in the Tropic of Cancer, this would refer to a prime and thereby change the sense. Just as little is the sense of the main clause a thought, only the whole composed of main and subordinate clauses is such. It may be added that several common components in the antecedent and consequent clauses may be indefinitely indicated. It is clear that the noun clauses with who or what and adverbial clauses where, when, wherever, whenever are often to be interpreted as having the sense of conditional clauses. For example, who touches peach defiles himself. Adjective clauses can also take the place of conditional clauses. Thus, the sense of the sentence previously used can be given in the form the square of a number which is less than 1 and greater than 0 is less than 1 and greater than 0. The situation is quite different if the common component of the two clauses is designated by a proper name. In the instance, Napoleon, who recognized the danger of his right flank, himself led his guards against the enemy position. Two thoughts are expressed. Napoleon recognized the danger to his right flank. 2. Napoleon himself led his guards against the enemy position. When and where this happened is to be fixed only by the context, which is nevertheless to be taken as definitely determined thereby. If the entire sentence is uttered as an assertion, we thereby simultaneously assert both component sentences. If one of these parts is false, the whole is false. Here we have the case that the subordinate clause by itself has a complete thought as sense. If we complete it by indication to place and time, the referent of the subordinate clause is accordingly a truth value. We can therefore expect that it may be replaced without harm to the truth value of the whole by a sentence having the same truth value. This is indeed the case. It is to be noticed that for purely grammatical reasons, the subject must be Napoleon, for only then can it be brought into the form of an adjective clause belonging to Napoleon. But if the demand that it be expressed in this form be waived, and the connection be shown by and, this restriction disappears. Subsidiary clauses beginning with although also express complete thoughts. This conjunction actually has no sense and does not change the sense of the clause, it only illuminates it in a peculiar fashion. We could indeed replace the conditional clause without harm to the truth of the whole by another of the same truth value. The light in which the clause is placed by the conjunction might then easily appear unsuitable, as if a song with a bad subject were to be sung in a lively fashion. In the last cases, the truth of the whole included the truth of the component clauses. The case is different if a conditional clause expresses a complete thought by containing, in place of an indefinite indicator, a proper name or something which is to be regarded as equivalent. In the sense, if the sun has already risen, the sky is very cloudy. The time is the present, definite, and the place is also to be thought of as definite. Here it can be said that a relation between the truth values of conditional and dependent clauses has been asserted, namely, such that the case does not occur in which the antecedent clause refers to the true and consequent of to the false. Accordingly, our sentence is true when the sun has not yet arisen, whether the sky is very cloudy or not, and also when the sun has risen and the sky is very cloudy. Since only truth values are here in question, each component clause can be replaced by another of the same truth value without changing the truth value of the whole. To be sure, the light in which the subject then appears would usually be unsuitable. The thought would easily seem distorted. but this has nothing to do with its truth value. One must always take care not to clash with the subsidiary thoughts, which are, however, not explicitly expressed and therefore should not be reckoned in the sense. Hence, also, no account need be taken of their truth values. The simple cases have now been discussed. Let us review what we have learned. The subordinate clause usually has for its sense not a thought, but only a part of one, and consequently no truth value as referent. The simple cases have now been discussed. Let us review what we have learned. The subordinate clause usually has for its sense not a thought, but only a part of one, and consequently no truth value as referent. The reason for this is either that the words in the subordinate clause have indirect reference, so that the referent, not the sense of the subordinate clause, is a thought, or else that, on account of the presence of an indefinite indicator, subordinate clause is incomplete and expresses a thought only when combined with the main clause. It may happen, however, that the sense of the subsidiary clause is a complete thought, in which case it can be replaced by another of the same truth value without harm to the truth of the whole, provided there are no grammatical obstacles. An examination of all the subordinate clauses which one may encounter will soon provide some which do not fit well into these categories. The reason, as far as I can see, is that these subordinate clauses have no such simple sense. Almost always, it seems, we connect with the main thoughts expressed by us, subsidiary thoughts which, although not expressed, are associated with our words in accordance with psychological laws by the hearer. And since the subsidiary thought appears to be concerned with our words of its own accord, almost like the main thought itself, we want it to be we want it also to be expressed. The sense of the sentence is thereby enriched, and it may well happen that we have more simple thoughts than clauses. In many cases, the sentence must be understood in this way. In others, it may be doubtful whether the subsidiary thought belongs to the sense of the sentence or only accompanies it. One might perhaps find that the sentence, Napoleon, who recognized the danger to his right flank, himself led his guards against the enemy, expresses not only the two thoughts shown above, but also the thought that the knowledge of the danger was the reason why he led the guards against the enemy position. One may in fact doubt whether this thought is merely lightly suggested or really expressed. Let the question be considered whether our sentence be false if Napoleon's decision had already been made before he recognized the danger. If our sentence could be true in spite of this, subsidiary thought should not be understood as part of the sense. One would probably decide in favor of this. The alternative would make for a quite complicated situation. We would have more simple thoughts than clauses. If the sentence, Napoleon recognized the danger to his right flank, were now to be rather having the sentence, Napoleon was already more than 45 years old, not only would our first thought be changed, but also our third one. Hence, the truth value of the latter might change, namely, if his age was not the reason for the decision to lead the guards against the enemy. This shows why clauses of equal truth value cannot always be substituted for one another in such cases. The clause expresses more thought in connection with another than it does in isolation. Let us now consider cases where this regularity happens. In the sentence, Bebel mistakenly supposes that the return of Alsace-Lorraine would appease France's desire for revenge. Two thoughts are expressed, which are not, however, shown by means of antecedent and consequent clauses. That is, Bebel believes that the return of Alsace-Lorraine would appease France's desire for revenge. Two, the return of Alsace-Lorraine would not appease France's desire for revenge. In the expression of the first thought, The words of the subordinate clause have their indirect reference, while the same words have their customary reference in the expression of the second thought. This shows that the subordinate clause in our original complex sentence should be taken twice over with different reference, of which one is a thought, the other a truth value. Since the truth value is not the whole referent of the subordinate clause, we cannot simply replace the latter by another of equal truth value. Similar considerations apply to expressions such as know, discover, it is known that. By means of a subordinate clause of reason and the associated main clause, we express several thoughts, which, however, do not correspond separately to the original clauses. In the sentence, because ice is less dense than water, it floats on water, we have 1. Ice is less dense than water. 2. If anything is less dense than water, it floats on water. And 3. Ice floats on water. The third thought, however, need not be explicitly introduced since it is contained in the remaining 2. On the other hand, neither the first and third nor the second and third combined would furnish the sense of our sentence. Mhm. It can now be seen that our subordinate clause, but ice is less dense than water, expresses our first thought as well as a part of our second. This is how it comes to pass that our subsidiary clause cannot be simply replaced by another of equal truth value, for this would alter our second thought and thereby easily alter its truth value. The situation is similar in the sentence: if iron were less dense than water, it would float on water. Here we have the two thoughts that iron is not less dense than water, and that if something floats on water, and that something floats on water if it is less dense than water. The subsidiary clause again expresses one thought and a part of the other. If we interpret the sentence already considered, after Shelswig, Holten, maybe something like Svelvik, Holstein, was separated from Denmark, Prussia and Austria quarreled in such a way that it expresses the thought that Schleswig Holstein was once separated from Denmark. We have first this thought, and secondly the thought that at a time more closely determined by the subordinate clause, Prussia and Austria quarreled. Here also, the subordinate clause expresses not only one thought, but also a part of another. Therefore, it may not in general be replaced by another of the same truth value. It's hard to exhaust all the examples given by language, but I hope to have brought to light at least the essential reasons why a subordinate clause may not always be replaced by another of equal truth value without harm to the truth of the whole sentence structure. These reasons arise: 1. When the subordinate clause does not refer to a truth value, inasmuch as it expresses only a part of a thought. 2. When the subordinate clause does refer to a truth value, but is not restricted to doing so, inasmuch as its sense includes one thought and part of another. The first case arises: A. Indirect reference to words. B. If a part of a sentence is only an indefinite indicator instead of a proper name. In the second case, the subsidiary clause may have to be taken twice over, that is, once in its customary reference and the other time in indirect reference, or the sense of a part of the subordinate clause may likewise be a component of another thought which, taken together with the thought directly expressed by the subordinate clause, makes up the sense of the whole sentence. It follows with sufficient probability from the foregoing that the cases where a subordinate clause is not replaceable by another of the same value cannot be brought into disproof of our view that a truth value is the referent of a sentence having a thought as its sense. Let us return to our starting point. We have found that A is equal to A and A is equal to B have different cognitive values, the explanation is that for the purpose of knowledge, the sense of the sentence, that is, the thought expressed by it, is no less relevant than its referent, that is, its truth value. If now A is equal to B, then indeed the referent of B is the same as that of A, and hence the truth value of A is equal to B is the same as that of A is equal to A. In spite of this, the sense of B may differ from that of A, and thereby the sense expressed in A is equal to B differs from that of A is equal to A. In that case, the two sentences do not have the same cognitive value. If we understand by judgment the advance from thought to its truth value, as in the above paper, we can also say the judgments are different.